help them. Then there's a group of his disciples. And in this passage, Jesus turns to his disciples, and this is what he says. It should stand out to us that there's a difference between just coming to Jesus and coming to God because we need something, and coming to him and being a disciple. And that's really what this passage is driving at. So we're going to kind of run down through a couple verses at a time. Verse 39, and he spoke a parable to them. A blind man cannot guide a blind man, can he? Will they not both fall into a pit? So I want some way to illustrate this. Where'd Keegan go? Keegan, and we need someone else. Someone you trust. Is there someone here that you trust? Paul, great. Okay. Can you do that on? Yeah, on yourself. And Keegan, this one's going to go on you. Okay, Paul, do you trust Keegan?
Yeah.
Good. Because you're going to follow him. Can you see Keegan?
Nope.
You can? Well, that doesn't work. How well can you see? You can. Okay. Well, even if you can see a little bit, that's okay. Because the word here, blind, by the way, means kind of like smoky. It might be completely blind, but it's more of a figure of speech. So even if you can see a little bit, that's okay. All right. Now, Keegan, there's 3 stools kind of here in front of you. They're sort of this way. You're going to lead Paul, and I want you to, it's going to be really hard here. It's going to be hard to follow my voice. Because there's, okay, I want you to follow my voice and lead Paul to me. Paul, how do you feel?
Where is it? Is he blindfolded?
Alright, you can take your blindfolds out. What was the danger?
No one had eyes.
No one had eyes. Okay, and it's really significant that the person leading didn't have eyes. Pull your blindfold back down, Paul. No, you can leave yours off. Paul, feel better about following Keegan now?
Yes.
Keegan, would you feel better about leading Paul now?
Yeah.
Are you going to run him into the projector stand again? Okay, lead him back this way. Now remember, you're leading him. When you're not wearing the blindfold. When you're not wearing the blindfold is when you run him into stuff. Right, thank you. Now, what I've been really aware of as I was studying to be a teacher was that there is a difference between being able to see and being blind. It's really easy to say, okay, I get this passage, I understand, don't follow blind people, don't fall in a hole, or walk into a music stand, or projector stand, or whatever. But if this is a passage about teachers and students, about disciples, and those who are leading disciples, we need to keep in mind what this means. There are people who should be followed and people who shouldn't be followed. Now, the first step of the guiding principle is that whom you follow is important. Right? We all can look around and say, okay, there are people whose teaching I trust, people whose leading I trust. Right? And now we'll move on, we'll see how this leads into the next verse. A pupil is not above his teacher, but everyone, after he's been fully trained, will be like his teacher. Now this seems like a very different image, a very different situation. How does this connect with the other one? The word pupil here is the same word that's used 10 or 12 verses earlier it says Jesus turned to his pupils, his disciples. Okay, when the disciple is fully trained, he'll be in the same form as his master. Now the word disciple, pupil here, in English, we get the same word from this, discipline. So when we think of discipline, there's a couple different things we think of. Sometimes we think of like, oh, you're in trouble, discipline. I actually had a good conversation with a student. I was subbing in Carlisle. I was subbing 7th grade, and if any of you deal with 7th graders on a regular basis, you know that trying to manage a group of 7th graders is like being in a pet store when all the hamsters get loose. And so I'm in a computer lab with these kids. They're all supposed to be sitting, like all they have to do is sit at a computer, and they've got study island in front of them, and they just like answer the questions. If there's someone next to them, they can help, and that's okay. And they just have a hard time doing that. And there's this girl, and she gets up and she's like across the room. I said, you need to like go sit down here. Like, you've got the computer there in front of you. And she's like, I know she's not a bad girl, you know, I talked to her a little bit. I said, okay, Sophie. Her name's Sophie. That's what I'll call her, because it's actually her name. I said, Sophie, I want you to understand what discipline is. We think of discipline as being in trouble. Right? But discipline and disciple are, we call them cognates, means they have the same root, they come from the same place, linguistically. Discipline is what guides us, it's what teaches us. So there's a kind of discipline that does this, but then there's another kind of discipline that we think of that's more like this, right? You know, wax on, wax off. That's discipline too. Both of them require something of the student, right? Both of them require discipline. There's a kind of self-discipline that comes that every teacher hopes the students will develop, okay? But there's a kind of discipline that comes sometimes as correction. Like, okay, you're having a hard time understanding this, let me help you remember. Right, so write it on the board. By the way, the capital of Montana is Helena. I'm from Montana, so I feel like I had to put that. Now, this ties in very directly with the previous verse because whom we follow is important because whom we follow affects who we will become. Right? If you choose to follow a blind person, you're disadvantaged because you'll fall into a pit, but because you are learning, you are a disciple, you are being formed by the person who's blind. All right, next section. Why do you look at the speck that is in your brother's eye, but do not notice the log that is in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, brother, let me take the speck that is out that is in your eye, when you yourself do not see the log that is in your eye? You hypocrite. First take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye. Whenever you see certain principles or certain images in the Bible that are being repeated, it's usually intentional. And here, we're coming back to the idea of vision, what you can see. And with 2 verses earlier, we were looking at blind, not being able to see, and the implications on leading. Here, we're looking at people who are blind and not able to see, and they're trying to help somebody else. Right? This is the same situation, only we're looking at it from a different perspective. First, we're looking at it from the perspective of, I'm a disciple, I'm looking for whom I should follow. Do I want to follow someone who can't see? Now we're looking at it from the perspective of someone who is trying to help, is trying to guide other people, but cannot see. This is what really stood out to me in the last few years. What is it that makes me or makes someone qualified to lead and instruct other people? Because there is a difference. And how can I make that discernment in myself? How can I know myself well enough that I know if I should be leading or teaching other people? Right? I have students who are under me who are trusting me to teach them how to multiply fractions or divide triangles and polygons and whatever I'm teaching when I'm teaching math. But also, what was really standing out to me when I was first looking at this passage a few years ago is, how can I be a husband? How can I be a father? Because no one understands better than a parent what it means to have someone grow up underneath you and start to become what you are. And I had a lot of issues that I didn't know how to deal with. I had a lot of issues with God that I didn't have answers for. I had a lot of questions and a lot of struggles, and I didn't know what to do with them. To the point that I wrote a poem about it. I thought about reading a poem. I didn't, but I was really asking myself, how can I, when I don't want to live, ever have kids? Or ever have a wife that I will be leading and forming when I'm not sure that I want to be here myself? And that, I'm glad I had that awareness then, but I had to find a way through that in Christ, and in what we'll look at later in the passage. Now this passage is often pointed back to a few verses that one verse that we didn't look at that's before this, judge not lest you be judged. That passage actually ties into this, but it's just too much. I feel like I almost picked too much up here. But it is important for us to be able to assess in Christ and have Christ revealed to us and lead us through, right? Lead us through, and that's an important principle that comes up very directly later, what we can see and what we can't see. Guiding principle, how and whom you follow is important, because whom you follow determines whom you will become, and how you lead is important. You can probably guess where this is going, and it's going right where the next verse is going. For there is no good tree which produces bad fruit, nor on the other tree a bad tree which produces good fruit. For each tree is known by its fruit. For men do not gather figs from thorns, nor do they pick grapes from a briar bush. The good man out of the good treasure of his heart brings forth what is good, and the evil man out of the evil treasure of his heart brings forth what is evil. For the mouth speaks from that which fills the heart. Danny, throw me those two fruits next to you. Hopefully I can catch them, because I'm terrible at catching. I'm not going to juggle them. If I had three, I would juggle them. Two fruits. Where does this fruit come from? No, Martin, how do you know? I don't even know that. Where does this come from? Just know it all. Doesn't know anything, no. It comes from Florida, and the sticker says so. Right? It says it right on the label. Where does it really come from?
I have no clue.
No, I don't mean what state. What is this?
Orange.
It's an orange. Where do oranges come from?
Orange trees.
How do you know they come from orange trees?
The book told me your parents told me.
Because you need to book your parents to tell you that an orange comes from an orange tree?
Common sense.
Common sense, right? Did this come from the same tree?
Yes.
What kind of fruit is that?
Oh, the grapefruit.
It's a grapefruit. Did it come from the same tree?
Yeah.
How do you know?
Because it's a different fruit.
Yeah, it's a different fruit. Right? It's common sense. It's a general principle that grapefruits come from grapefruit trees and oranges come from orange trees. Do you want to eat it?
Not yet.
Oh.
I don't really want to eat that one grapefruit.
Oh, that's too bad. Because the passage talks about there's good fruit comes from good trees and bad fruit comes from bad trees. I have here just two good fruits. They're both good. I don't know if you know this, but grapefruit. It's an interesting